Okay, so if you have not seen Silo Season 2, Episode 10, this is your spoiler. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. Don't come back later and tell me, oh, you spoiled it for me, because I'm telling you now, if you haven't seen it, don't watch this video unless you just want to. So in Silo, the show Silo, what we see is a lot of manipulation, game theory, drama theory. I've touched on some of these in my videos here, and I'm going to continue touching on it in this video, which is a show on Silo, and how they're also giving sort of a silent acknowledgement to some of the other stuff I've been saying about the Constitution, which is that you can't be in Congress or president unless you have served a certain number of years in the military. Now, you can be in the Congress of the United States, and that does still exist, but not, I'm sorry, the United States of America, you're not required to have a military background. But when you run for Congress of the United States and you're using the federal Constitution, you're required to have military background as Congress members or the president. So this is the beginning of the very end of Silo, Season 2, Episode 10, where this guy, he's a congressman, he's walking into this bar, and I had done research on this bar years ago, and this is a bar in downtown DC where a lot of congressmen get together to make after hours backroom deals, right? Probably where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was working when she got chosen to become a member of Congress. Probably. So Silo is a show about these underground silos where they have people in there and they're following these rules, and it's like a whole community. There's about 10,000 people in there. They have little revolutions, and they're trying to figure out how to handle the people at the top of the silo are the upper class, and the people at the bottom of the silo, who are like the engineers and miners and stuff, they're the lower class. And so there's a lot of revolutions that happen every so often, and they're trying to figure out how to keep people from revolting. So it's control. It's a control thing. It's a power thing and a control thing and a class division thing. And this is, I'm guessing, either before the silos or during the silos when they're first being built. Probably not after, though. So you're watching Silo, and Silo is this, people in this living in the silos are in the future, and so I'm assuming this is in the past. Now, there's a couple things we want to touch on here, and one is that this guy walking into the bar is going to meet this lady, and she works for a newspaper, The Post. They're playing a lot of games with each other where they're not really saying things outright. They're playing these games with each other. Now, I've talked about this book, Meaning, by Stephen Sheffer, where he says, I know that you know, and you know that I know, and I know that you know that I know. And the whole entire book is about meaning and what we mean when we say something. And this goes to the locution, illocution, and prolocutionary acts that I've talked to you about. So he's saying something to her, and it's not really what he says is not really what he means. So she's got to figure out what he means. So then she says something to him, and then it's not really what she means. And he's got to figure out, does she mean this or does she mean that? And so he already knows exactly where this conversation is going from the get-go. So he walks in here knowing exactly what's going to happen with her. Now she's, like I said, she's a journalist with The Post. So she calls him here and he's like, oh, I thought this was a date, which he didn't really think it was a date. He's just telling her that. And she's kind of like, yeah, you knew that it wasn't because you're playing with me. And I know you're playing with me. But she doesn't say that. She just says something, some comment that lets him know that she knows that he knows. And there's all this manipulation and game theory and drama theory going back and forth between them. So the silo was set up as a control mechanism. Now he says, or she says, that he works for the Army Corps of Engineers later, and that's not exactly a military position. And so being in the military doesn't really qualify for being a congressman. But he knows that. But then she talks about the people who run the campaigns. So she says something first and then says the information you need to understand the first statement. She says it last, or that's the way the writers put it. So when you hear it, you're not thinking much of it. But when I point it out to you, you're going to say, oh, that's what it meant. So he goes in there and they're having this conversation, and really they're sort of gaming each other. So this is a time when supposedly a dirty bomb hit, but a dirty bomb didn't really hit, that it was something else. And he talks about Katrina being an Army Corps of Engineer employee. He says something like, well, it's almost like he's saying that they intentionally built the dams in New Orleans to fail. So either they intentionally built them to fail so that they could create more work for themselves, or he's saying it's better that people think we intentionally failed than to think that we're actually incompetent and that we couldn't do the thing that we needed to do. So then they're not talking about silos, but he gives her a clue, which is the Pez dispenser, to sort of let us know, the audience, that he's referring to the silos that we already know about because we've been watching the future. Whereas when he gives the Pez dispenser to her, she doesn't really know what it means. She's like, what the hell is this? Now, a Pez dispenser is something that it's long, and at the top is a little duck on this one that he gives her. And it dispenses out one at a time, and it's a candy, but it's a candy for who? So in the silo, we see every once in a while somebody has to go out and clean, and that sort of keeps the revolution from occurring because it's a sacrifice. As long as the sacrifices are made, it keeps people in line because it keeps them scared. So when he brings up New Orleans and the fact that he worked for the Army Corps of Engineer, and the Army Corps of Engineer built the dams in New Orleans, it's sort of like, I feel like he's sort of saying, when he gives her this Pez dispenser, like, we're building the silos to fail. Or if they fail, we're going to claim that we intentionally built them to fail. So I don't know yet if what exactly he's saying, because again, we're at the locution, illocution, and perlocution. We have to figure out what he meant by that. Okay, so I don't want to get a hit for copyright infringement, so I'm going to speed through some of this, that it really doesn't matter what, because I've already explained it to you for you to hear everything, but there's a couple things I want you to hear in this. And then you can, of course, go back. This is on Apple TV. It's called Silo. There's 2 seasons. It's really good. 10 episodes per season so far. And I think there's going to be another season 3 come out. I don't know when it's going to come out yet. But he's walking up to this bar. And like I said, this is a kind of a famous, very old bar in D.C. that a lot of politicians frequent to do their backroom deals. And so he's being scanned for radiation, and the congressman, this guy here, asked the guy that's scanning him, does that thing ever go off red? And he's like, no, not really. So it's kind of like, okay, this was like a joke. This was a trick. This so-called dirty bomb isn't really a bomb at all. Or if it's a bomb, it's not a bomb in the way we think of a bomb, where like it's an explosion. It's more like something that causes chaos or a shift of some sort. So, it's not really, it doesn't really ever go off. So then he walks in the bar, and there's all these presidents and, things on the wall. You see the flag there and everything. And he's walking up to this, looking for this lady. He knows her. He knows what she looks like because he did Google her, even though he changes the subject when she asks him. And we'll see that because in this conversation between the two, like I said, there's a lot of manipulation. There's a lot of game theory, drama theory. There's a lot of what did he mean when he said that, and what did she mean when she said that? What's the locution and the illocution and the perlocution? So he walks up and she's like, "Oh, are you so and so?" And she's like, "Oh, we're going to pretend like we don't know what each other looks like." Like she's like, "Yeah, I know we've looked each other up. I looked you up, you looked me up, blah blah blah." He's like, "Eh, well, I guess not." He sits down. So, okay, let's get it out of the way. Where were you when it happened? Now, there's two conversations going on here, and actually probably three or four. So he could be talking about New Orleans, Katrina, because I think she probably lost people in Katrina because she doesn't answer his question when he says, "Did you lose anyone?" And maybe he knows that she lost people in Katrina, but she doesn't want to answer him. But they also could be talking about this so-called dirty bomb that went off, where she's not answering him on that either. And he says, "I was in session that day serving the good people of Georgia's 15th. Well, okay, what do you mean by good people, right? That could be any of the variety of groups of people in Georgia, what they call sundry. A lot of congressmen back in the debates, early debates through the 1800s and stuff, would use the word sundry. The sundry people, the sundry citizens, meaning the variety of people that we have, because we have military people, we have government people, we have people born in the state, we have people born on federal lands, we have federal people, we have commissioned officers, we have non-commissioned officers, we have representatives of the state, we have, women, children, and all these are varieties of people. So when he says good people, what does he mean by good people? That could mean something to him that it doesn't mean to anybody else. That could mean all the evil people that he thinks are good. And she says, "Well, I was at work," and he's like, "Am I supposed to answer your sentence? I'm not sure." So in other words, he's saying he already knows who she lost. She doesn't have to tell him. Well, why did he ask the question? Because he wanted her to think about it. And he wanted maybe the opportunity to say, "Yeah, I know who you lost, because am I supposed to finish that sentence?" Because he can. He's done his research on her. And then he says, "Is that bad that I can finish your sentence?" Because he's asking her now, so where do you work? Some kind of reporting place, a magazine. He's acting stupid, like, "I don't know you." Oh yeah, the Post, right? And then she says, he says, "Are you still at the Post?" And she says, "Did you really not Google me?" Like, hello, everybody Googles everybody nowadays. And he's like, "Is that bad?" She was, he says, no. She says, "I know that you're a freshman congressman." So she's pretending she doesn't know much either, but she Googled him. If she expects him to Google her, it's probably because she has Googled him. Oh, he says, "Oh, well, my age and the flag, I guess it gave it away since you didn't Google me." Okay, well, my age, the flag pin. Representing, like you said, the 15th District of Georgia. He says, "Fighting 15th." Okay, so this is what I want to look at. She says to him,
I mean, because you can't run anyone these days unless they served. After you got a master's in engineering at the University of Georgia, you joined the army.
so she's saying that you can't run anyone these days unless they served. Well, who is you? Because she's not talking about him running himself. He's talking about someone else running him. And that you can't run anyone these days unless they've served. And then she brings up his army career. She says, next, she'll say, "You joined the army after school." And then she says, "But not really, because it's not like you were humping M16s. She says, "Well, kind of, because Army Corps of Engineers isn't exactly humping an M16 through the sandbox." And then he says, now he's changing the subject. He says, "I better change the subject." So really, he's not qualified to serve. Just by saying that he joined the army doesn't mean he's actually in the army as an enlisted person or a commissioned officer. She's saying, you like you joined in the army in their efforts, like you joined in the mission, because you can join the military as a civilian but not be in the military, but you're working with the military. So it's better to say you were with the military as civilian support. Okay, you're not actually joining as in becoming a member and signing a contract and all that stuff like the military does. Now, that's a statement that they say before and then they clarify it later. So if you had the clarification first and then they said that statement, it would make more sense to you. But because they flipped them, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So that's what I'm going to point out here. So then they were talking about New Orleans. Before I start bragging about what we did in New Orleans. So I don't know if he's talking about rebuilding the dams or having originally built the dams, because the dams when Katrina hit failed, and those were built by the Army Corps of Engineers. So when the Army Corps of Engineers built those dams and they failed, was it better to say we built them to intentionally fail? Or is it better to say we screwed up royalty and we are incompetent and can't do our job? So when he says, before I start bragging about what we did in New Orleans, well, why would you brag about that? You would say that you were bragging about it if you want someone else to think something. And he's wanting her to think that they built them to intentionally fail because it's a brag, right? Well, that was on purpose, right? So you can hear that in your head. So that goes back to our book meaning. What do you mean when you say that? He means for her to think that the Army Corps of Engineers intentionally built the dams to fail. Now again, we're talking about this guy is going to start building the silos to protect people from a thing that's not there. Protects people from radiation that's not actually out there. Because we saw when he walked in the building that they were all told there was a dirty bomb. And he said, oh, like, why would you ask the question unless you knew the answer? Does that thing ever go off? Nah, not really. Well, because he knows it's not going to go off, because he knows there was no dirty bomb. And they've hinted to that in the silo where they say, yeah, we can go out. And then they say, no, you can't go out. But they need a sacrifice. They need somebody to go out every once in a while to keep other people in line so that they won't revolt because they'll be too afraid. So they keep talking back and forth. They're like verbal games here. They're verbally gaming each other here. This is the locution, illocution, and perlocution. And what they're going to do after that once they leave this conversation or this multiple topic conversation. And she asks him, because she knows he's mincing words, that he's mixing topics. Are we talking about New Orleans, or are we talking about the dirty bomb? Are we talking about you asking me the people I lost in New Orleans, or are you asking me about the people I lost from the dirty bomb? So she's asking him the dirty bomb, and he says, yeah. She says, no, I didn't lose anybody, you. No, his uncle, something about Iran. He took it personally. Sister was in DC, but she was away. Oh, how convenient, right? And she says, the dirty bomb's what I wanted to talk to you about. I think she wants to ask him, what dirty bomb? Was there ever really a dirty bomb? And he's like, starting to feel like I'm the only, so he's changing the subject now. He says, I'm starting to feel like I'm the only one that thought this was a date. Well, he knew it wasn't a date. He knew exactly why he was there. He Googled her, pretending like he didn't know what she looked like. She called him out and said, you're going to pretend like you don't know what I look. You're going to pretend like you didn't Google me because I Googled you. So I'll just pretend like I didn't Google you either. But I did Google you. And she says, nobody says that anymore. Unless they're 95. And then he makes this comment. Let's go back just a tiny bit.
You being a bulldog, you would talk.
So he says he's a bulldog and she's a duck. Now, he brought a gift for her that he says he just picked up at the spur of the moment. Doesn't mean anything. He just thought he should bring something. It was the first thing he saw, and he grabbed it. And now he's giving it to her. But it's a Pez dispenser with a duck on it. So he's giving her a sign. He's giving her a signal. She has to figure out what it is. Okay, so then she says, you know, let's see.
I thought you said you didn't let me out.
Let the record show I actually dodged the question.
So he says, let the record show. That means he knows that she's taking notes on this. So he says, let the record show I actually dodged the question. I didn't avoid answering it. I didn't say, I avoided answering it by dodging it. I didn't say, I didn't Google you. And she says, so she's feeling him out. She's getting to know him. She's getting to know what he's about. She's understanding him. She's smart. I think she didn't realize he was going to be so good at this. And he is very good at it. How about I just cut to it? I'm here because I think that the people you work for, the good people of Georgia that he's talking about, the good people that he works for. And by that, I mean the citizens of this country. So to him, the people he worked for are the good people of Georgia who got him elected. She's saying she means the people of the country, the citizens. Not the shadowy creeps who pay for campaigns. So this is at 3:40 on my little recording here. And she's saying that these are the people who got him elected. And what did she say about the people who got him elected? That they're required now to make sure that you have service.
Fighting 15.
And because you can't run anyone these days unless they serve.
And you can't run anyone these days unless they serve. So the people who run the campaigns for these people to get them into office now have to run people who have served. Okay, so served. And then she starts talking about the army and him being in the army. And then, oh, wait, you weren't really in the army. It's not like you were humping M15s or M16s. So they're talking about here what I've been talking about in my video on the Constitution, where I say that you have to have been so many years in the military, either currently or for president, 14 years. You can be retired or done serving military, but you have to have had at least 14 years in. That's why you can be either a private citizen, which is a natural citizen, or currently a citizen of the United States, as long as you have 14 years. Okay, so let's go back. I think the people need to know if there are plans to strike back against Iran, whether or not there really was a radiological weapon attack on the United States. So now they're talking about the silos where the silos either haven't been built or they're currently being built, but she's saying that people need to know if there actually was an attack on America, on the United States or not. She says the United States, so she should have said America. Like, how about you? What do you think? Do you think the people should know? Let's see what he says. I think I better go. That's his answer. He can't answer her. Okay. So he gets up, blah, blah, blah. He gives her a gift.
Gift or
How I was brought up.
something from your home state? It's not a peach.
Nah, it's just something I panic bought at the
Something I panic bought at the convenience store. That's not true. This was well thought out. It was this Pez dispenser with a duck on top. And this in the silos later appears, and it's called a relic, and it's off limits. Nobody's supposed to have it. The relics are not for the people. So this Pez dispenser, what does it do? It lets a piece of candy out. You push a button and it lets one piece of candy out. And that's the way the silo works. The silo has a system in it where it'll entice someone or at least one person to want to go out of the silo. And when they go out, they have to clean the camera. And then shortly after they die, because they can't breathe. So this whole thing is about manipulation. It's about manipulation, game theory, lying to each other, power, all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to bring up this part where he says, that he was a congressman, he was in the military, so that qualifies him to run for office. Yet she says, but you weren't really in the military. You didn't really join or enlist or be a commissioned officer. You just joined the military as a civilian, working as a civilian to do some of the things that the military aren't qualified to do. So we see here in the Constitution of the United States, two different people, two different groups of people. We have one type of citizen here, a citizen of the military, and they work for the rest of us. In the old oaths, it was an oath to be in service to the United States, but loyal to the United States of America, and that was in the oath of the military. Now here it says, no person shall be a representative who shall not have attained the age of 25 years and been at least, they don't have to put at least, because in legal talk, in proper legal talk, you take out all superfluous, you take out words that don't matter. So if they say and have been, or and been 7 years a citizen of the United States, that's all they need to say. They don't need to say and have been at least, because you have to have been. And then not an inhabitant of the state in which he was chosen. So he has to be 7 years in the military currently, because he can't be an inhabitant of the state. And then with the president, we see no person except a natural born citizen means he was in the military, but he retired or left the military and became a private citizen, which is a natural born citizen, or he's currently in the military. He's currently a citizen of the United States. But at any rate, being in or out of the military, he had to have been 14 years a resident within the United States. So he had to have been 14 years on federal land or in the military. Now we know if you're at war, the federal land follows you and it stays under your feet always. So if you're a soldier and you're marching through France, the land under your feet belongs to the United States. The land under the feet of the French soldiers belong to the French military. The land under the feet of German soldiers belong to the German military. It's that way when you're in the military. The land you control is the land you currently stand on. If you're at war. If you're not at war, you can step off the regular post, a designated location, onto someone else's land, because you're not at war, you're at peace. And so you can go onto their lands as long as you're peaceful. Once you are at war, it's different. The land goes wherever you are and the jurisdiction goes wherever you are if you're in the military. Okay, so if George Washington was fighting during the Revolutionary War and they were traveling all along the East Coast or the Eastern States or the Southern States or whatever, the federal territory, the federal land was always wherever he was standing and fighting. So he took the jurisdiction of the federal government, of the military, with him. So he had to be resident on those lands wherever he was if he was fighting. Now, he could also be at peace, like George Washington didn't have to be at war for 14 years, as long as he spent some time on a designated military post. So if he had 14 years working in the military whether at war or at peace, he qualifies for the office of the president. He can leave the military and go to his home on the Potomac River and kick his feet up and relax. And then the government can come get him and say, look, we need you to run for president. The people want you. And he can then go from being a private citizen to being the president because he's had the 14 years. Or let's say he has 14 years and he's still on a military post, serving 14 years in 1 day and 14 years in 2 days and 14 years in 3 days. He is still a citizen of the United States. So he can be either. He can be retired or left the military service, or he can still be in as long as he has or has had the 14 years. So he can be a resident of the state wherein he inhabits. Whereas the Congress cannot be a resident of the state, meaning they have to be in the military. Okay, so this idea is reflected in a lot of different things today as far as being in or out of the military. There's specific things that you can do when you're in the military and specific things you cannot do if you're in the military, and specific things that you can do once you've been in the military, but you can't do them until you get out of the military. Like the GI Bill. You can use a GI Bill whether you're in or out of the military. A lot of people use it when they're out of the military, I think. But the Hazelwood Act, which is a Texas thing for anyone who is in the military, they have to be out of the military to be able to use the Hazelwood Act. That's a scholarship program for veterans, for military people who have had time in service. They can use the Hazelwood Act. So the Constitution is nothing new here. This is what it says. This is the federal government is for a federal military Congress and a president who works for the military and the United States of America. And that's, I think, what they're touching on in the last part of the silo. A long way to make a point, but I think it's well served and justified. And with that, farewell. I have another video. Hopefully will be coming out today. The day just seems to fly by so fast, but I'll be working on that and hopefully get that out today. Like, share, subscribe, post this on Facebook. I appreciate all the help I can get, and this is bringing us towards more freedom. More knowledge is freedom. Knowledge is not just power, it's freedom. You don't need to have power to be free. You just need to have knowledge. So knowledge is going to be what gets us to freedom. So if you care about that at all, it's going to take more than just me and you and the people on this channel who subscribe. So I need people to share more. And if you could share on your social media, that would help us all. Okay, so with that, I'll see you all in the next video.